Hi, this is Jack O'Halloran from Superman 1 and 2. I'm here to do IMT podcast with Mike Sims, and I think he's trying to duplicate Clark Kent wearing his glasses, but that's never going to work.
Well, my guest today I'm really excited about is Jack O'Halloran. He's known for numerous projects, movies, including Superman, Dragnet, and he has been a boxer that has been inducted in the Hall of Fame. And thank you, Jack, for being on my podcast.
My pleasure, for sure.
So tell me your story. How'd you get into all this?
I went from football to boxing, and I was going to play pro football, and I was with the New York Jets, but it was back when, in my era, you couldn't play pro ball unless your class graduated from college, which they should have that today because these kids are too young and they're getting hurt, and their bodies aren't mature enough. But that was the rule back then, and I left school early, and I was picked up by the Jets, so I had to play. We played in a farm team out of Philadelphia, Tinicum AC. And Dick Christie and his brother played on it. A lot of guys that went up and played pro ball played on these games, and we used to play 2 games a week just to keep our levels up. And then when it came time to play, the Eagles had acquired a great team. Jurgensen was down there, and a lot of friends of mine were down there. And I said to Eubank, I said, I think I'd like to get down and play down in Philadelphia he said, well, you've always got a home up here. We'd love to keep you. So, but I went down to Philly, and Philly was bought by Jerry Wallman, and they'd sold the team to Jerry Wallman. And he brought a guy by the name of Joe Q. Harrigan as a coach. And I watched this guy trade a championship football team away in 3 months.
Wow.
Traded Sonny Jurgensen and Tommy McDonald, and traded 4 great linemen to Green Bay for Jim Ringo, who was at the end of his career. And I mean, just moves that were incredible. I mean, they traded Sonny Jurgensen for Norman Snead. It was a joke.
Wow.
So I come out of a meeting one day with Timmy Brown, who was a running back, pretty good running back.
Right.
And Q Harrick walked right by us. And I said, whoa, don't you say hello to anybody? I said, you know what? While you're at it, take this team and shove it. And Timmy said, and while you're at it, trade me.
Really?
I was talking to some friends of mine in Philly, and Ali had just won the title. And I said to the guy, I can beat that guy. And the next thing I know, I was thrown into a gymnasium and embarked on my boxing career. And I would think I was 16-0, and they did a physical one day and said, you're suffering from a disease called acromegaly, kid. You shouldn't be boxing at all.
Really?
In fact, they couldn't believe how I even got up to get in the ring. And because it causes such mental depression and stuff. And I just shirked it off and just, yeah, right. And I kept on going like a crazy man until then when I came out to fight Norton back in the bottom of my career in 72. And it was a great fight. I mean, I beat him, but they took a home decision. But I won the town and stayed in San Diego, knocked out a half dozen guys, and became California heavyweight champion. And
wow.
And the doctor that was the fight doctor there was a very sharp guy, and he said to me when I went to get a physical with him, he said, kid, you suffer from acromegaly, and you've got to do something about that. And I said, what are you talking? What's acromegaly? He said, it's a tumor of the pituitary, and I think you've been told this before. And my jaw was out of alignment because my jaw grew out, and it was it causes tremendous growth hormone in your body. Like your body pumps out 10% growth hormone. Mine was pumping out 160.
Wow.
So in fact, my skeleton today in my body is 43 pounds heavier than it should be because of the size of the bones and the density of them. So I carry that weight around with me all the time. But he talked me into going to Scripps and getting a workup done. And when they seen how blown out this thing was, He said, you either get a fix or I'm taking your boxing license. So I went back east to Mass General, and because I talked to some people on the East Coast, and they had this machine, a cyclotron proton machine, which was a laser beam that didn't burn, and it knocked the tumor out. Bang, bang, wham. Thank you, ma'am.
Wow.
And I was very fortunate, actually. But it took a while for my body to adjust to it. And I only had a couple more fights and I retired. And they came to me when I was boxing, and I lived in Boston. They came to me to do the Thomas Crown affair because McQueen came into Boston and we looked after him. We took good care of him, and he and I became good friends. And he said, man, you got to come down and I'm going to put you on this picture and we'll get you SAG card. You got to come back to Hollywood, man. We'll have a great time. Steve was a terrific guy. And I said, I was undefeated. I said, I don't think so. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. Then they offered me the Great White Hope in 1968, and I had just knocked out Manuel Ramos, who was ranked number 2 in the world. And now I'm looking to fight Ali.
Wow.
And they wanted me to go away for 6 months. And it was put together by Raymond Patriarca from Rhode Island, who was trying to get me off the street so I wouldn't wind up in jail for organized crime stuff. And I said, I'm not going anywhere. And they said, well, you got it. You know, this is Raymond's going to be very nice. I'll take care of Raymond. Don't worry about it. And so I turned it down, and Steve McQueen called me up. He said, well, you nuts, man. We were trying to get you out here. And what it was a huge movie. It was the biggest movie in Hollywood.
Right.
And I was walking out the front steps. James Earl Jones is walking up, and I'm walking down. And he stopped me, and he said, you're Jack O'Halloran. I said, yeah, you're James Earl Jones. He said, is it true what I just heard about you? I said, it depends on what you heard. He said, you just told Hollywood to take the biggest movie and stick it? I said, well, I guess you could say that. He said, I got to shake your hand. I never met anybody that did that before. And we became friends. And then when I retired in 75, they called me to do a picture called Farewell, My Lovely with Robert Mitchum. And,
wow.
And I owned a couple construction companies, and I looked around and I said, you know, maybe it's time we give this a shot. And they flew me out to California, and I did a screen test with Harry Dean Stanton, and Mitchum said it's either him or I don't do the movie. So I blame it all on Robert Mitchum.
Wow.
He became my mentor, and he was brilliant. I loved Robert. He was and Farewell turned out to be a pretty good movie, and my career just went right up the tree. I did King Kong, and we just did one film after another. It was
one success built onto the other.
Yeah, it worked out pretty well, you know. So here I am, 45 years later, and still pounding, getting ready to do. In fact, I got offers. I got 3-4 pictures offered on the table now that the pandemic is over. We're all getting ready, and I'm getting ready to make a mini series out of my book, and then we're going to turn that into a series. I've got 2 more books coming out.
Fantastic.
So we're building a studio in Nevada, which is a 4 million square foot studio, which the industry needs direly. And we're going to put everything for the very first time under one roof. And then we're going to build a smart city next to it that'll house 30,000 people, so that people will only have to go 15 minutes to work instead of what they do today, driving 2 hours and an hour each way and stuff, because people have moved inland because it's cheaper. And,
right.
You know, it's kind of a hassle getting in and out to go to work every day. So that's going to alleviate a lot of stuff and make things a lot more cost effective. So now that this thing is settled down, people are moving around, and we're starting to move things forward, and everybody's looking forward to it. It's going to be great.
It's going to all explode out there.
The industry will actually move to Nevada. It'll be great.
Yeah. So you're talking about your book, Family Legacy. It's dubbed as a fictional memoir, but it's actually things that you've overheard your whole life.
Well, it's my life. I changed my name to Jack Pagano, which is a relative of mine out of Sicily. And I did that because there are some things have no statute of limitation, you know?
Right.
And then when I did the book, I had to sit down with the FBI and the CIA and NSA, and NSA were friends of mine, and they made the meeting over in Hawaii. And the FBI said, you can't publish this book nonfiction. If you publish it nonfiction, we will not allow it to be published in America.
Wow.
And I said, well, wait a minute. So they said, so we had a discussion, and I changed a couple of little things, and they said, well, that's okay, just make it fractional, and as long as you're confusing people, we're fine with that, So we did
So,
that just by changing my name and where I lived and stuff, and as a kid, and my family background and stuff, But my
so is it
father was a man called Albert Anastasia, who was the head of Murder Inc. and probably one of the most feared Italians that ever came in the country. And he was, my mother was married to a guy named O'Halloran, and in 1942, Albert was stationed in Indian Gap, Pennsylvania, in the Army as a sergeant. Man, he was a special sergeant teaching longshoremen soldiers how to be longshoremen.
right?
And they it was the way of getting him out of the way because they were looking for him everywhere. I mean, there was a funny joke one time. There was a captain of a platoon saw the New York newspapers and they're looking for Albert Anastasia. Where is he? Well, how come we can't find him? And he called up New York and he said, this Anastasia guy you're all looking for, I have him right here in my army. And the guy said, who? He said, Albert Anastasia. It's all over the newspapers. You guys are looking for him everywhere. He said, he's right here in my army. The guy said, hold on a minute. And he came back on the phone. He said, oh, that's all media print. He said, we're not looking for Albert. That's all a bunch of garbage. you know. So he of course never stayed at the thing, and he came into Philly every night, and because he controlled all the waterfronts of the United States, and
Right.
he was very close to the IRA guys down there. And there was a guy that was a close friend to his, Rip Collins, who Tommy Collins was his cousin. He was the famous IRA guy in Ireland.
Yeah.
And Rip was like an engineer for General Electric, but he ran the waterfront for the IRA. So he was a minder. He was put on me as a minder when I was a kid by my father. And my father met my mother, because my stepfather was overseas. He was a lieutenant aviator. He was flying. He was over at World War II. And Albert ran into my mom, and she was a fan. She sang extremely well and stuff. She was gorgeous. She made Jane Russell look like a boy.
Oh, okay.
And they had a tour d'affaire, and I was the remnants of it. So there you go. He just he put somebody to mind over me, and thought he would keep me away from New York. But when he was killed in 1957, I was 14 years old, and all of a sudden I was introduced to Meyer Lansky and Frank Costello, and my education started.
Right.
As to who I was and what was expected of me, and things of that nature. And then I was a young man, and up in New York, and I was, I think, 18, 19 years old. I was in between semesters of school, and I was running a soft ice cream. They used to have those ice cream trucks like McDonald's,
Right.
but they had one called Tasty Freeze, and they
Yeah.
were the first ones that had Carroll Brothers. It was Carroll Brothers, and they were the first ones that have hot dogs and stuff on the truck besides ice cream. And
Right.
they were an outfit. They was owned by the outfit out of Chicago, and they put me in charge with another guy of this depot in Newark. That guy was only a kid, and the education I got was amazing because the Cubans were coming out of Cuba then. They were being thrown out of Cuba. I mean, very, very wealthy people that came into Miami with just what they could hold in their hands,
Right.
and they put them up in New Jersey, down the street from Newark, and they came what an education I got, because they would come and they got one truck, and then they got two trucks, and they got three trucks, and they were building their fortune back again. These guys were super smart businessmen, and to watch them operate was a gas. So I learned a lot, and I did that for a while, and I was introduced to a lot of people in New York at the same time, and life goes on, and I got into boxing, and I think if my father had been out or Frankie Carbo was home, if he wasn't in jail, I probably would have been world champion
Yeah.
because
Wow.
Frankie Carbo ran the boxing world, and I had a lot of talent. I know I kicked myself in the butt a lot of times because I possessed a lot of talent, and I didn't. If I ever would have trained like Ali and I'm going away to camp for 6 weeks or something like that, but I used to take fights on a week's notice, just
Wow.
to get out of town and go somewhere and take care of some other business. And it
Right.
was like a day job, you had to have a day job in the outfit.
Right.
And I was, so I did that. I mean, for several years, and I beat some very good fighters. When I was in shape, nobody beat me. I mean, I was.
Well, I saw the pictures of you and your boxing pictures, and I tell you, it's pretty menacing.
Well,
You're,
I remember they took me down. They called me on the phone. The promoter, Lou Viscusi he was from Florida, but he was promoting in Houston, Texas, and they were looking for a fight for Frazier. He called me on the phone. He said, "Jack, you want to fight Terry Daniels, who was a white kid? They wanted to get a white guy to fight Frazier." And Terry was ranked, I think, sixth or fifth, somewhere in the top 10. And I said, yeah. He said, you'll take the fight? I said, send me a ticket. So I was in great shape because I was in my house. I had like indictments all over me from the unions and stuff. And I
right.
just was locked in my house for a while. So I was training. I got in great shape. I was running hard every day. And I went down to Houston and I got off the plane. Viscusi calls. He said, my God, you're in shape. I said, well, aren't you supposed to be in shape when you come to a fight? And I destroyed this kid, Terry Daniels. They should have stopped in the first round, but
Right.
I knocked him out in the third round. And I'm on a plane going back home with Yank Durham. And he said to me, listen, if you fight one more good fighter, you can have the Frazier fight at the Houston Astrodome. And I said, I'll tell you what. I said, you name the place and the time and just send me a ticket. He said, are you serious? I said, just you name the fighter and the time, send me a ticket. So they called me about 2 weeks later. He said, you're fighting Cleveland Williams, which Houston was his hometown. You're fighting Cleveland Williams in Houston, such and such a date. And I said, good, send a ticket. So I stayed in shape and I went down. Thank God I did. Because I went down and fought Cleveland. And Cleveland was, I think he hit me harder than anybody ever hit me in my career.
Wow.
I mean, he hit me a left hook and my toes shook,
Wow.
And I fell back into the corner and he came charging at me. So I thumbed him and cuffed him and spun him around. I whispered in his ear, I said, you're never touching me the rest of the night, Sonny. So get used to this left hand of mine. And I just boxed the shit out of him. And then the last 3 or 4 rounds, especially the last 3 rounds, I'd hit him a combination. He'd go to fall down. I was grabbing him under the elbows and pulling him in and said, don't be falling down on me, man. We've been dancing all night. Because he was, he was a legend in his time. And,
Right.
if he went the distance with me, he could still earn money. You knock him out, it hurts him more, So, and I liked him. He was a good guy. So I beat him 10 out of 10. And Terry Daniels got the Frazier fight, and Cleveland fought George Savallo in the same card. And I think they got scared when they seen Cleveland hit me, and I just shook it right off. It bothered them a lot. So that was the end of the Frazier fight.
Wow.
But then no one wanted to fight me for a while, and I think the next fight I had was George Foreman.
Wow.
In Madison Square Garden. The problem with that is I only trained a week for Foreman. It's like a lot of things. I
just not enough.
When I fought Kenny Norton, they called me on the phone. They said, do you want to fight Ken Norton? I said, when? They said, next week. I said, what do you mean next week? Well, the fight fell apart. And we need somebody. And we need somebody who knows how to fight, somebody with a name. We wanted that. I said, yeah, send me, you'll take the fight. I said, send me a ticket. And I went out and I gave him, I gave him one of the worst beatings he ever had. And I could have actually sat on a stool on the 9th round. At the end of the 9th round, he and I were standing toe to toe, and it was, the crowd were standing on the chairs. It was so loud that when they rang the bell, nobody heard it.
Wow.
So they rang the bell like 3 times, and finally the referee separated us. And I was going back to my corner. He ran across the ring and hit me behind the head and drove me into the ring post. And the commissioner was sitting right there. And he jumped up in my corner and he said, if you can't continue, you just won the fight on a foul. And now I'm angry. I said, for the foul, I said, I'll kill this guy.
Right.
You know, not realizing I'm in his hometown and they're building him up for a title shot. And you got to really thoroughly beat the hell out of somebody to get a decision in their hometown.
Right.
But man, he got a split decision, but he would never fight me again. And and I stayed, and I won the city because people went crazy that they never saw. No one knew I could fight like that out there. I had never fought in San Diego, and
So,
I ripped off about 6 or 7 knockouts. And then I fought a guy in San Francisco that nobody wanted to fight, Henry Clark, and I took the state title away from him. And
thank you for listening to the IMT show with Mike Sims. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The IMT show is an opinion show and not to be taken as serious personal, legal, tax or financial advice. It is meant as entertainment only. IMT show, Mazarov for Mike Sims is not responsible for ad content. For more information on show schedules and content, visit www.mazarov.net/IMT.